This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, but rocking a beautiful winter Toronto background behind me because I love Toronto. And folks, here we are at the tail end of January, the 31st, 2025, and well, you know what, folks? We got to talk some wrestling today, or at least Grunt. Folks, I got to credit Tommy Kovac, the host of Splat from the Past, for connecting me with my guest today. And I had a lot of fun reintroducing myself to Grunt, a wrestling movie. And, well, I've had a few wrestling personalities on the show, including Larry Zbyszko. I've had James Ellsworth. I've done a tribute on Roddy Piper with his son Colt and his daughter Ariel, who, of course, is also wrestling now under the name Teal Piper. And of course, Jerry Swirls has been on here a few times as well. Plus, Princess Victoria, who I've had on the show a number of times as well. I got this nice T-shirt from her, although I could not get her to decide who she loves more, Jim Cornette or the Iron Sheik. One of these times she's going to admit it to me. But folks, today we're going to be talking some films, but also highlighting Grunt, a wrestling movie. Folks, I have the director of that movie, Mr. Allan Holzman. How do you do, Alan?
Great. I'm glad to be here. And it's also this year is the 40th anniversary of Grunt.
You know, it sounds funny when you say that, like 40th anniversary. I told my coworker last night that I was going to be interviewing the director of Grunt, a wrestling movie, and she says to me, she goes, "So you're going to be talking about your bathroom habits?" I was like, I mean,
Well, I'm glad you
maybe.
brought that up.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, my
So,
coworker.
so in terms of that, one thing I found out from the wrestlers that before a match, they don't bathe for 3 days, so they use their smell to intimidate the other wrestler. At least that was in the older days.
Unless you're Owen Hart, we used to rib a lot, and Bret Hart said that one of the things Owen did when he wrestled him was he rubbed sardines in his armpits,
There you go.
and yeah, Bret was saying that Owen had him down the mat in a chokehold, and he said that smell nearly killed him.
Well,
Uh,
we resisted smell-o-vision and Grunt. That's for sure.
yeah, I grew up with wrestling, and I'm right now in the midst of collecting the old LGN figures that they had in the 80s, the rubber ones. And I'm finding a lot of them at the conventions now. And so I've been collecting those. And I grew up with it in the 80s. I think I got introduced to wrestling in 1987. I know this because I mean, we used to have the Grand Prix wrestling here, but I think what happened was just before WrestleMania 3, which to me is an event that's never been topped. I think WrestleMania 3 was the best wrestling event I've ever seen. And before WrestleMania 3, they had the stickers in the Hostess chips, potato chip bags. And I just remember one day, of course, when I was in school, one of my classmates had a sticker of Jake the Snake Roberts. And I love snakes, hence my DJ name is Python. And I caught wind of this and I looked at that sticker and I said, who is this and what's this all about? And he told me, and he said he puts a snake on his opponents. And I was like, wow, I want to see this. And gradually, mostly through my older brother, I was able to collect the stickers. And there
Okay.
was 20 of them in that set. And I was intrigued by all the odd looking characters. Like I was like, are these actually real people? You know? I mean, besides Jake the Snake Roberts, you had characters like Rowdy Roddy Piper. You had the Honky Tonk Man. You had Kamala. You had George the Animal Steel. You know, Outback Jack. I was like, these are odd looking people here. It's like who. So I wanted to watch some wrestling. I wanted to see these people. And I remember the first night was at my uncle's place, sat down to watch some wrestling. And I remember at the time, one of the key people I wanted to see was Jake the Snake. I didn't see him that first night, but I did become a huge fan of Roddy Piper that night, though, because of course this was just before WrestleMania 3, and I told his son and daughter this story. The main event on that card was a six-man tag elimination match. And of course the heel side, the bad guys, you had the adorable Adrian Adonis, you had King Harley Race, and you had Randy Macho Man Savage. And then
But
for
you didn't
the
have exotic Adrian Street.
oh, we're going to talk about him. But we had Randy Macho Man Savage, and on the face side, you had the Junkyard Dog.
Oh yeah.
You had Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who's the only one alive out of the six-man tag match now. And you had Rowdy Roddy Piper. And Roddy Piper ended up being the sole survivor, eliminating Randy Savage at the end of it. And I was like, man, I love this. And I got to see WrestleMania 3 when that came out. And I followed wrestling for a long time. And of course, hindsight's 2020. Now you know all the secrets and stuff. And you see wrestling beyond what Vince McMahon wanted you to see. And so I always enjoyed the characters and the strange characters. And of course, you mentioned Adrian Street. We just lost him not too long ago,
Yeah, yeah.
82 years
2 years.
old. And I'll always applaud him for beating the living shit out of Jimmy Savile. You know, I gotta see if I can get Miss Linda on the show here at some point because
She's great. I loved her. Yeah.
well, if you could connect me with her, I'd love
Well,
to
I,
have her
I
on
I
here.
didn't have the connections then, and I don't have them now. I really wasn't part of the wrestling
Let
world.
me guess, you're afraid of her, aren't you? You're
Uh,
afraid. You're afraid, aren't you? But I gotta say though, um, 1 year ago, this month I had a retina operation,
oh my.
and I was just going to get my eyes checked out. My eyes checked out perfectly fine.
Okay.
My eyes are fine now. But while I was waiting, I was watching Grunt, the wrestling movie. You know, it's like I'm gonna revisit this, and I didn't know this was out on Blu-ray. I just checked that out, and I was like, what? It's out on Blu-ray now. I gotta get that. So I gotta say, you did a number of things with this movie that I thought was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. And you balanced the satire and the humor of the documentary filmmakers, which I thought were hilarious. You balanced that with wrestling that A looked real, but B, I noticed that you took the wrestling was presented very respectfully, I think. And also, I wasn't sure because we're following this masked character and trying to figure out who he is. Is he Mad Dog? But I love the fact you weren't always certain whether he was going to win or not in these matches. And I was like, I thought that was great. I thought you did an absolute brilliant job with this movie.
Even with the midgets.
You know what? Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Um, I've been looking at ages of wrestlers because the Bible had said, you live to be 70 years old. You have 70 years old, 80 if you're strong. And I got thinking about that. I was like, wonder how many wrestlers are strong. How many make it over 80, you
Well,
know?
it's a really rough life. They don't have it easy, and the mat is really hard.
Well,
You know,
guess what? Lord Littlebrook made it to 87 years
wow,
old,
wow, that's
making
amazing.
him the oldest of WrestleMania 3. I'm like, Lord Littlebrook made it to 80 friggin' 7, you know? And there was a few wrestlers that topped that topped 80. Adrian Street made it to 82. Bruno Sammartino, I'm not surprised, made it to 82. And Dory Funk Jr. is still trucking at 83. Abdullah the Butcher, I don't know how made it to 84, but he's still with us. And Freddie Blassie made it to 85.
Oh,
And
he's great.
you know, Luzaz, I think, was 86. Either Greg or Vern Gagne, one of them made to 89. And of course, you got the fabulous Moolah, 84, Mae Young at 90. Like, some of these ones really win it, you know? And yeah, and I do predict that there'll be some that do make. I won't be one bit surprised if Ricky Steamboat surpasses that because, well, he's always kept himself in great shape. Uh, Terry Funk almost did. He was
Oh, yeah.
79. He almost did, you know? And I think Terry Funk is probably one of the greatest wrestlers because he could wrestle any uh, form of wrestling at all, whether it be technical, brawling, hardcore, he could do everything. And he didn't have to necessarily win the match to steal the show. So I got a lot of fond memories of watching wrestling growing up, and but I loved how you filmed Grunt, the wrestling movie. Talk about the origins of this film. Were you a
Well,
wrestling fan growing up?
I saw it a lot on TV. I wasn't a fan, but I was aware of it, so it didn't really. It was just on TV on Saturdays, so I watched it, and but I wasn't. I was more of a football fan, and baseball fan. So, but I was in working in the New World Productions post crew. I just finished. I was in the midst of re-editing my second movie that I directed that was taken away from me, and I wasn't allowed in the editing room. And then I convinced New World to let me recut it after they finished it, and so I was working on that, and they liked what I did, and then they said they would give me another movie. and Grunt and wrestling was starting to be really popular, and that's when Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan had their 1-2 matchups, and so they said, you know, if I could come up with an idea for a wrestling movie, they'd do it. And Tony Randall, who was the head of Post, was a big wrestling fan. And he had started with me when I was editing Battle Beyond the Stars, and he was the assistant in special effects. And I relied on him a lot in the editing of that movie. So we had a really close bond. And his favorite movie was Don Johnson. I'm getting his last name wrong. I'm sorry. It is Johnson, I think. The wrestling movie was shot in 16. I meant to prepare better for this. I forgot. I thought something. It was a wrestling documentary done in the 80s, and Tony loved that. And that wasn't my style of movie. I'm a real visual action or oriented type director and in suspense. So I like to put the camera on the inside. And that documentary was all on the outside of observing. And so he became one of the second unit cameras. We shot in 16. And so I had a camera from my father-in-law. It was a World War II 16 windup. And I could go anywhere. So I could be on the ring itself at any time, and often lying on the ring, getting low angles and seeing what you couldn't see on TV, and making it more of an action movie and just generating cuts. And so for every take, I had a different angle. So we had a main camera and a second unit camera, but then I had my camera. So the ultimate shot was and Mondo Guerrero was the wrestling choreographer, and we used his ring, and he introduced us to so many wrestlers that and was able to talk with the wrestlers and have their confidence because they respected him a lot. And he's featured in the Georgia bout, where the mask really tears him apart, and so Mondo was like, I could go Mondo. I need it more exciting. It's like, okay, I'll come up with this, and that was kind of what we did. I just kept looking for more and more excitement from whatever we could get.
Absolutely. Well, I found the humor to
Oh,
be,
so I didn't really answer how it started. So,
yeah.
um, uh, so, so Tony said, what if, uh, so we were talking in Spinal Tap, it just said, and Tony said, well, what if we do a Spinal Tap version of wrestling? And I thought that would be great.
Brilliant.
Amazing. So we came up with the story. Go Yoken was one of my favorite Japanese samurai movies at the time. I was a real samurai film buff, and not buff, but I watched them all the time. And Go Yoken had a plot where the samurai, well, who's loyal to his master, was part of a massacre, and so he couldn't go against his master, so he dropped out and didn't become a swordsman. But then he finds out that the master is doing it again, which is to take over another society because they can't generate income anymore. So he comes back out of hiding to stop him. So I thought, what could make a wrestler hide from this? So I thought, well, maybe he decapitates somebody in the ring. So that became kind of the start, and kind of defined the humor, in a way.
That kind of happened. I'll show you my tag team partner. Here's my tag team partner. This is Skittles. Skittles is my tag team partner. I never tag him in because he is too lazy.
Oh, the name of the documentary is I Want to Hurt Some People.
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
very realistic documentary of that era.
Yeah. Well,
Or
I was
I
gonna
want to
say
hear.
I love the humor of the movie because you have number one, I love the fact you shot the that opening there in black and white. You had
Well,
the
that was this spoof on the Orson Welles movie.
Mhm.
Well, we thought, open a wrestling movie with Citizen Kane. It's like go for it.
I love Citizen
And so,
Kane.
so that you know, uh,
Well,
and then when we found Duck's Breath Mystery Theater, that really once we had the outline, one of the producers from the money side was a big fan of Duck's Breath Mystery Theater. So that's when we got that cast involved, and so it was a combination of getting people who were like committed to a certain sense of humor that was sick, you know, and enjoy. I mean, basically, it's like growing up with Mad magazine. You just have a sense about life and humor, and certain things worked. And the exciting thing was that rock and roll and wrestling was evolving. And so Tony had worked with this writer, Nelson Lyon, who had worked originally with Saturday Night Live, and he knew Andy Warhol. So, we thought, how cool. What if we got a quote from Andy Warhol? And so we did. And when I got to talk with him, and he said, "What would you like?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, come up with something that you think I'd say." So that's when I went out drinking with Duck's Breath Mystery Theater, and they came up with the line, "A grunt, it's more than a movie, it's a movement." And I called Andy, Mr. Warhol back, and I called him Andy at the time, and just said, "What about this?" And he said he didn't have much of a voice, and he said, "That sounds like something I would say."
love that.
But
You
then
know,
New World said we can't make any money on that. We're New World wound up hating the movie. They thought they wanted a wrestling, match, and we gave them all the matches. 13
mhm,
matches. But they
mhm.
wanted it straight up. Is the wrestler going to make it? Is he going to, is none of that humor? They didn't get it at all.
No,
So
obviously.
they dumped it. It never got a release. I begged for a one theater LA release. We got pick of the week in LA Weekly. I staged a live wrestling event outside the theater with Queen Kong and Killer Tomato, and had a poor man from K Rock be the referee, and we organized a thing where they would pants him in the ring at the end because he would declare it over, and they would get pissed off at him. And so they really went for it. And he came out of the ring because he kept saying, "Is wrestling real or not real?" And so he came out of the ring and he said, "Wrestling is real."
I remember Queen Kong. I don't remember Killer Tomato, but I remember Killer Tomatoes the movie though. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Well, I actually edited the trailer for that, which Nelson wrote. That's how that connects too. But they didn't use that trailer either because the humor in that was too far off. That was the Revenge of the Killer Tomato we did, and
Hmm.
we had masses. He had came up with the idea of just people running back and forth and just change the title of where they were while they were screaming.
I love that. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Um, it's funny that move that where the decapitation happens, where the guy gets his head caught in the ropes. There was a real life incident where Mick Foley had done that. He was in a match
Really?
with Vader, and I think it was in Japan, but I could be incorrect on that. Uh, but Mick Foley got his head caught in the ropes, and when he slid free, it severed his ear. you know?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And for month Mick Foley went with it because he was like because well he went with it because number one he was trained a lot by Terry Funk, so you know how crazy Terry Funk is. Well, Mick Foley he passed that down to him, and number two, Mick Foley knew that that would put Vader over even more. That he could play that off, like look he did to my ear, and this and that. So um, Foley just went with it, But yeah, that's a dangerous move. One of the things I found so funny was that the guy's head comes off, and of course he was the champion. And there's like months going by, and they're like, what can we do? He hasn't defended the title in months. Like, duh. I love that humor, Of course he hasn't defended the title, But
Hence the plot of the movie.
well, I thought it was brilliant because Mad Dog goes into either hiding or they
Yeah.
say he jumped off a bridge and all of this, and there's a lot of humor there. You got these two documentarians trying to find him, of course, and I love these two guys. Um, the name of the two actors escapes me right now, but they were great. Um, Back and forth together, especially when the one guy was like in great hysterics, and the other guy would be like, "Would you like a coffee?" Just something simple like that. Like, you know, you just know how to talk him into it, and the guy always agrees to it, But what I found funny is that you got this mask character coming out there. And you had also a lot of great style of matches in there. Like the El Toro match was great,
Well, that
And
that was with Mondo. That that
y-
was that was
y-
that was his tour de force.
yeah, that was great because I was like, oh, Mask is going to kill this guy. But it's like, the match went on. I was like, okay, they're really, you're really ramping up the tension here. Like, I don't know who's going to win that. And of course, you had a handicap match where he took on Dick Murdoch and his partner. And of course, that sound effect when Dick Murdoch gets crushed. And then you had the one with the midget wrestlers, which I thought number one, the sound effects to them was really hilarious. But
That was their actual. They did that. That's what
yeah,
they did with each other. We didn't add that. That's how they worked with each other. They did that for us.
yeah, and I love that. And then of course, you got the big battle royale main event for the to see who's going to have the belt. And that's where you find out the truth behind everything. And I won't give anything away because I got to say, you have me on the edge of my seat on that. When the big reveal happens, I'm like, wow, that was that was brilliant. And if New World Pictures or whoever didn't want this movie, screw them.
Oh yeah, they really. Well, they. When I was sitting in the second the vice distributor's office, whatever the name of that position is. And he said he had his legs crossed, he was wearing a suit, and he said, "Look," and he pointed to the bottom of his soul. He said, "This was on a Friday afternoon." He says, "That's where you're going to be Monday morning," because they had an opening in the southeast, and they because the film of theirs dropped out, they couldn't get it, so they had to fill it. So they put Grunt there with no trailers, no advertising. They just thought wrestling would do it, and there was a hurricane at the same time, so no one came. And then they sent it out as a sports film and never even made it to video.
Wow. And now it's on Blu-ray.
Well, people were encouraging me to release it myself because no one claimed ownership. Um, the producers who put up the money didn't want it. New World Pictures didn't care about it, so they said I should just pretend like I own it and distribute it. And I was tempted to do it, but then this came out, and then I was shocked when I saw the Blu-ray because, and I tried to get a hold of them, and I can't reach them. That there's a flashback to the beginning during the bout, and the beginning was in black and white, and the rest of the movie's in color. So it flashes back to black and white. And since we saw it in 16, when you finish a movie, because of the way you do the hot splices, you don't want to see the frame line, so you have to cut it to black before it goes to the next picture. So you checkerboard it, so it goes through a printer twice, once as an A roll and once as a B roll. And where the color, where the images for one, it's black on the other, so there's never any problem as long as they're lined up correctly. But they didn't look for the B-roll on the final bout, so, or they didn't get to them, so it cuts to black. So the whole flashback to the beginning is lost. It just cuts to where it's a blackout. And I would just, did it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Did it, okay.
Like I said, I don't understand why they wouldn't want this movie because I thought it was brilliant.
It even has breasts in it.
Oh yeah. Well, we love that too. But
That was actually a hard thing to cast because we had to find someone with a French accent who was willing to expose her breasts and be in a wrestling movie. And luckily, we found an actress who just got here who couldn't speak much English, and she was great.
absolutely, absolutely.
And then we haven't talked about John Tullis, who is a great hero of mine and of Tony's, and he was someone who I knew of from my youth, and it was great to have him in. And he couldn't wrestle much himself, but then he really got into the chains. That was his area of expertise. So we kind of followed whatever wrestler had, wherever their areas were, we adapted to that and said use that. Go with that. And but between John Tolis and exotic Adrian Street, he couldn't handle that at all. You know,
You
when
know,
Adrian gave him the big lip pooch and smack, it was like, and Miss Linda's there, chewing on her gum. It was great. But
yeah.
also Wally George, he's Rebecca De Mornay's father, who she disowned, and that was the beginning of the whole right wing, I'll make up the truth as I see it, with his audience, yelling at, the dimwit to the guy from K-Rock who had a special message from The Mask, which was a ripoff of Paul and the Beatles with Paul is dead, but Mask is Joe. So, it was an excuse to do everything we thought was really silly and funny and, kind of political, in a way.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. Yeah, Adrian Street is sadly gone, but like I said, he lived to be 82, and I'm gonna see, like I said, see if I can get Miss Linda on here. But Adrian Street was an interesting character. Um, I
Yeah,
love.
he actually came up with a whole subplot with him and Mask that he would betray him, and like they were bonding, but then they were going to be pals, but then they, screws him over.
Well, Adrian Street was one of these guys that kind of came down. You had Gorgeous George, and of course he inspired guys like, Ric Flair, and you could even say somebody like uh, Adrian Street, that flamboyant uh, kind of presentation. And Adrian Street was really cool when it come to the showboat. We could also really wrestle as well, and he
Yeah,
was
he
great
had
in
an
the role.
amazing.
Yeah.
He could fly. He got really
Mhm.
high with his kick, and he wasn't that tall, and he could really jump. It was amazing.
Yeah. So, and I loved watching that interview segment where it's him and you have Mad Dog, or not Mad Dog, The
Doc,
Mask. I get tongue tied on the M's there, but Mask. And
Well, it's Mad Dog or Mask. Which one?
well, we find out. Well, we find out the truth, you know. Which
Well, Lola knows the truth.
yeah, but Adrian Street was a great addition to this. Talk about getting Adrian Street involved.
I can't really remember. I just think we heard about it. We see we weren't allowed to use anyone from the WWF. Period.
Yeah, I know because Vince
They
McMahon's a
wanted
prick.
total control, and that was out of the question completely.
Vince McMahon right now is busy jobbing to Janelle Grant, you know.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
he's
so
getting
we
his ass kicked in court right now.
so we dealt with Mexican wrestlers first, and that's how we
Mhm.
got into the whole mask thing because that's all about masks, all that.
You know,
And,
it's funny you say that because when Barry Blunstein did Beyond the Mat, he had a lot of difficulties with WWE, you know, but he started out making a documentary on wrestling and somebody trying to make it in the business, and he ended up getting connected with Terry Funk, and through Terry Funk, he got connected with Mick Foley. And I think it was Mick Foley that turned him on to Jake the Snake Roberts, and it went from there. And um, but I remember him saying something in the commentary track about Vince not being a fan of this or whatnot. And personally, I'm not big on what Vince was doing with wrestling, and I love the
well, at that
I
time,
wish
at,
yeah.
at that time, we went to meet with him at the sports center because there was a wrestling event there, and we found out he comes in with an empty suitcase and leaves with a suitcase full of cash. But and that's when we met with him, and he said they had to have total control over it. So we dealt with a lot of retired wrestlers and wrestlers who weren't part of then it was the WWF, the World Wrestling Federation or something, whatever. And uh, so we just heard about whoever was available, and I guess they let us know someone heard about him, and I was excited by the idea, of course.
What WWE wrestlers were you interested to use? Was there any prospects as far as that goes?
No, um, they were out. There was never a desire to get in. They were just out. They were on the outskirts. So. Um,
Because I could think of a
the,
few
the
names that
Mexican
would have been.
wrestler in the beginning, Skull Crusher Johnson, he was actually a champion in Mexico,
Hmm. Hmm.
and his moves were amazing. And he had done that maneuver earlier.
Yeah,
And,
you mean where he loses his head?
yeah, and he had to get really drunk for that one. He did.
Did you guys pay him by getting his head surgically placed back on?
We're still waiting for him to cash the check. So
What was his reaction to that? Did he find it funny?
he liked the story. He loved it. He
Yeah.
was into it. Yeah.
I thought that was great. And then the whole thing about he hasn't defended the title and such and such. The guy died.
Well, can you keep your head and lose your title?
I thought that was brilliant, you know, and it didn't take anything away from the wrestling because like there was no funny business in the match there, you know. It was shot like you were watching a wrestling match with the great sound effects and this and that to heighten the dramatics of it. But um, it all this is in the documentary, like the two people filming, and that was where the humor come in, and I love that side of it. And like I said, you got really creative with the matches, you know, like you mentioned, of course, you know, midget wrestlers, for example, and I don't know if we're politically correct supposed to call them midgets anymore, but that's what they always called themselves. I gotta say, they brought a lot of comic relief even in their real life bouts in wrestling. I remember I was watching a tag team match of wrestling, and I forget who the two face midgets were, but the two heel ones I remember from WrestleMania 3, Lord Littlebrook and Little Tokyo. And these two teamed up well together. And they do things like one would duck and Lord Littlebrook would get hit by Little Tokyo, and they yell at each other, and Little Tokyo be like this. But I remember one of the funniest things, is because the ref gets caught up in this, and one ref ends up catching one of the good guy midget wrestlers, and he just sits him down. And of course, the heels get mad at him or mad at him. So the same move happens again, only this time he ends up catching Little Tokyo. And he's kind of like the referee's confused what to do. He's not supposed to do this. So he goes like this and he tosses Little Tokyo on the mat. I thought that was, but if you watch carefully, you could you could tell Little Tokyo was laughing. Like like they knew this is the great thing. These guys were athletic, but they knew that they were a major draw for children. And
Definitely, definitely,
oh
definitely. For
yeah,
everybody, yeah, they're total comic relief. But
absolutely.
but
But
it was used in the story to em, embarrass the mask and
hmm
make him get rid of his agent. And one thing we did, and Steve Strong who played the mask, said right away, and I can't act, and don't give me any words to say.
well,
And
that was
so,
probably a
that
great
was part of
idea. It
making
makes
him
adds to the
silent,
mystique.
because when he would talk, you would understand if he's masked or not. It would be a reveal. So the whole thing. So when his French, publicity person, tries to promote the battle with the director, she refers to the midget act as the four bin muffs. And that's when Mask gets really pissed off at her and says, behemoths. And he goes, you talk. And then the Mask punches him. So it's like we were able to pull our own little wrestling event in the scene. So it's,
Yeah, and that was great. And of course, that was all uh, perfectly put together as well. So
oh, and when the director and the sidekick go to see Lola, and they walk up the stairs, and then she hits him over the head with a frying pan, and just
I
keeping the
love that.
camera point of view. So the cameraman, um, Eddie Vanderenden, who was from Amsterdam, he was a generation older, and I was a little worried at first, but he came, but he got it. He just could only photograph standing up because he had the camera on his body, and it was pre, Steadicam days. But he had so he could operate from here, so from his chest. So I did all the low angles and stuff, but he was able to go up the stairs with me and the two actors, and we all fell down the stairs together. It was great.
Yeah, that was funny. And of course, she starts throwing camera
Film,
reels or film reels, I
throwing
should
film,
say, and
throwing
slow.
16-minute film is like everyone's fantasy in film. You just got piles of it and piles of it, and then it was great. It was like, it was good.
He's like, take it. And he's like, grab it before she changes her mind. And they're dragging all this real stuff into a taxi and or whatever. And I thought it was hysterical. I loved it.
Oh, good.
Again, I don't understand New World Pictures not liking this movie because I thought it was I mean, I can't understand what they had out at the time that they thought was so much superior to this. This was actually really clever. Some thought went into it.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, I that's
Well, any help
how
it
I
needs,
see it.
because it's really, you can't find it anywhere. It's really, I mean, I guess it can when the Blu-ray now a little bit, but it's the fact that it's never even been on TV. or but I redid it. I have a master with it, with the black part eliminated and the actual fantasy there, and it's in 16 by 9 now, so it's available through me. Anyone who wants to
Absolutely.
see it, I'm happy, to send you the link that you could send on to anyone who wants to see it. You know,
Yeah.
I have it
No,
on Vimeo.
yeah. No, I enjoyed the movie and talk about the when it comes to the matches themselves, I was going to say the battle royal, but really when it comes to the matches themselves, did you have the wrestlers work out what they wanted to do with the actors and whatnot, like in the ring stuff?
Well, we had certain goals that we had to achieve. Like,
Hmm.
we knew we had to establish Mad Dog as being mad. Why did they call him Mad Dog? So I'm from Baltimore, so I suggested a fight in Ocean City where he would just go wild and just destroy everything, like he. And so, and to get the crowds, that was a daytime crowd, so we couldn't afford to get a lot of people. So we made a lot of cardboard people, and if you had two cardboard people and one real person, you would believe it. So you increased your crowd size, tripled your crowd size that way. And at night we gave them little blinking lights as if they were taking flash camera shots, but they were cardboard. Anyway, and I grew up with a lot of food fights in school because my father had a bakery, so I always had two desserts, and I never ate, and so I'd always give them away, and then people wind up throwing them, and just always got. But I was old. My mother always gave me a ton of food, which I didn't like to eat. Anyway, I thought a food fight would be really good, that so people were throwing food and all that kind of stuff. So it had that flair to it. So we try to give personality, but it always had a plot, a reason in the plot, somewhere to fulfill. And like how Mad Dog had a fight that when he got his break as a wrestler, because he was willing to face this 400-pound guy in the ring, and so that was his youth, and just so that there would be some humor and something to watch that was different each time. And but we knew what, like, the one wrestler, the guy who played the commie Rocket or whatever his name is, he liked to have his head banged against the turnbuckle, so that was his thing. So you could actually, run him down and do it. And then the other guy was specialized in the eye burn. Mondo liked the eye burn a lot. And then
Hmm.
a lot was according to how many who could jump and who could kick and what their specialties were. Like American Eagle could really kick.
Hmm.
So we knew what they could do. So we asked them to do it. Or they told us what they could do, and we just tried to get them to keep doing it so we could get lots of angles. But one thing we were at the actual Olympic auditorium for the Battle Royale.
Hmm.
In a break from when we had a break, the camera people, the crew would gather together the biggest cockroaches they could find, and they would put toothpicks on their back with a little flag with their name, and they'd have a race. They put them all in the center of the ring and see who could race to the edge of the ring first.
Huh?
You follow that?
Yep.
That's how big the cockroaches were in the Olympic auditorium. And the narrow passageways below to get to the backstage area where the wrestlers were, where the fighters were, was really stark. We filmed there, but it was really interesting. The
I love.
battle royale I had to do in one day.
Yeah.
It was not even a whole day. It was like after lunch, it was like, there it is, and go as long as we can. We went until we stopped, but that was a 1 day event. You know,
Now, how did you? have the battle royal work out? You know, like did you leave that with the
Oh no, we worked out everything. Mondo and I strategized the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Okay. I love the Wally George segment as well, you know. It reminded me a lot of the David Letterman um interview that had of course uh Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman, you know.
Yeah. Oh, huh.
Yeah. So that stuff was great. Um
So
I
I
liked all
play
the
the
little
sound
things.
man in that, and I get thrown because we save money by his throwing me rather than a stunt person.
There you go. So you were taking the bumps.
Yeah. Oh, and the one thing where I almost lost my eye in the uh, fight in Georgia with Mondo and Mask, I really wanted his foot to come into the lens on the drop kick, and and so I got during a break in the main camera. I got down lay down on the floor on the mat and asked Mask to kick me, and the first one, he was like a foot away. And I said, while lying down, can you get closer? And then he put his head down to me. You want me to get closer? And I said, yeah. And then he just hits the camera and it bashes my eye. And I get up and I'm bleeding. But I could have lost an eye. I had to go to the hospital and get a patch on. But from that point on, they said, you're one of us. So they accepted me, and so
There you go. Well, I wanted to get into a little bit your background and how you got into the industry, especially your connection with Roger Corman.
well, I was a student at the American Film Institute in its early years in 1973, and I only had enough money for the first semester, and I had been working as an editor in New York before that, and I was actually a theater major in college, and I was more interested in theater directing originally. But then once I discovered film, I just fell in love with it and wanted to follow that. And I was a stutterer, and so editing film and spending long hours expressing myself in film became my way of being fluent. And so I didn't mind staying up all night because and when you're up in the middle of the night, no one can hear you stutter.
It's like, you know, and like the
But
tagline for Alien in space, no one can hear you scream. Well, in the middle of the night, nobody can hear you stutter.
and I was asked to do the montages for the AFI award to James Cagney. It was their second award show, and the first one was for John Ford. They showed whole scenes. So this time they wanted montages, but they couldn't afford anyone, so they asked me to do it, and uh, and uh, and I did it really well, and it won an Emmy award. And at the same time, I was applying for a job for Corman because of a student at AFI. She was asked to edit because she was editing this 35 millimeter film that starred Jack Lemmon, uh, and she didn't want to work for Corman because it was low budget exploitation, and she was headed for the stars as most students at AFI were then. And I jumped for the opportunity, and it was Candy Striped Nurses that his wife was producing, and so I did that, and then after I made my movie, I needed while I was editing my movie in my second year, I needed work, and Julie was doing her second movie that was for Jonathan Demme called Crazy Mama. So I edited that, and then I showed Roger my AFI movie, which was based on a short story by Roald Dahl, and I shot in 35 millimeter, and anamorphic, and he only fell asleep once during it, and I woke him up by reaching over and raising the sound. And I walked outside with him, and I said, can I do, can I do?" And he said, "Thank you very much, Alan. I'll see you later." And so I went off to become an action editor. I cut two movies for Fred Weintraub, and uh, and in Asia, one starred Robert Mitchum, Amsterdam Kill, and that was in Hong Kong, and before that with Jodan Baker and Susan Sarandon in a Filipino car race movie called Checker Flag or Crash. A bit of 40 Filipinos against Jodan Baker. Crazy. And then I cut another movie, and I got fired from that movie. And I was really pissed I got fired because the director was recutting. I was recutting, but the director was recutting of me, and he got angry and he fired me. And I sued, and I lost. And the industry was like a no-go for me at this point. But I still had this stuttering problem that was interfering with everything. And so I dropped out, took a construction job, wrote a novel about my life to try to figure out how why. And I was making, and I was always obsessed by rape as a subject matter in life. And I discovered while writing that by putting together the images, I was molested by my uncle when I was 6, the day my baby brother was born. And so suddenly life made sense to me, and I stopped getting chills when I saw older men, and so I stopped getting chills, and but it didn't affect the stuttering at all. But I at least understood my life, and I made a Super 8 movie all during this time about a stuttering rapist on roller skates based on M. So I was, artistically involved with, understanding the things going on in my life. And I really wanted to cut a good movie. And because I was tired of, turning shit into mediocrity, and I wrote to Roger asking him to recommend me to Coppola to edit Hammett, which he was producing. And Roger said, "I feel awkward recommending you to Coppola because I haven't talked to him for a while, but would you cut my biggest movie ever, Battle Beyond the Stars?" And I did that, and I wrote a book during it where I kept a journal called Celluloid Wars. That's on Amazon. And then I saved that movie in the editing, and then I asked him to direct, and he asked me 8 times to cut his next movie, and 8 times I said, "I want to direct. I've done enough for you as an editor." And he said, "Can you stutter and direct?" And I said, "I stutter less when I'm directing, but it's in the act of communicating, which is more than most directors do." And he said, "You have a point there, Alan. I'm going to put you through the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking." So the first one was second unit on a car movie, then additional scenes for a kung fu movie, and then a spaceship set was available for one day. And he said if I could write, direct, and edit an 8-minute opening of a space movie that could go anywhere, he'd give me a whole movie. And I did that. And then he said he wanted to rip off Alien, and I did that. And then the movie was too funny for him, and he punched the guy in the theater, who was laughing the loudest, and he made me cut a lot of the comedy out. And then it's still in there, but he couldn't take it all out. And then so I couldn't work for him again. And then I got a job for Fred Weintraub, who I'd cut 2 movies for before, so I didn't really have a problem speaking with him. And but he was the one who wouldn't let me look through the camera because John Alonzo was shooting, and then I couldn't go in the editing room. And that's when I asked to redo the movie, and that brought me to Grunt. So that was my background, full background getting to Grunt.
Talk about out of control because I've interviewed Betsy Russell on here
Really?
before. Yeah, she's gorgeous. I had her on here. I think it was 2016. I think I had her on here, and she is stunning. That woman is, and
I was probably the low point in her life.
yeah. I don't know. She had just done private school, and she talked about that with me about doing the topless scene. Where she said on horseback of all places, and he said, "Well, she said you can look back and know that she had that,
She
But
was beautiful. She was
she,
really
yeah, oh,
stunning.
absolutely,
Really stunning.
yeah, still is. She's in the Saw franchise, so she still looks great, still stunning.
She was fun to work with. She was really sweet. She was great. There was nothing. I mean, the cast was really good. It was, I mean, if you can imagine, I just gotten married, and and I was told I could rewrite the script, which I did with the younger producer to make it more believable. Then the producer arrives, throws out the script. You're doing what my daughter wrote. She was, Scorsese's girlfriend and had a lot of reputation. It was just so I okay, so I was game for that, and I would do that. But then I was told day one I can't look through the camera. And John Alonzo, who shot Chinatown, was highly respected, and I couldn't overrule him. And Fred was pointing, he's the master, and so here I am, a visualist who can't look through the camera. And so, I just I didn't want to quit because I had that experience of being fired before and all that stuff. It's better just to last something out, which I did. And then I wasn't allowed in the editing room, so I couldn't even save it in the editing. And everybody was calling me a horrible director. The editor was. He was looking to direct himself, and it's like the movie was a total embarrassment. But I had gone through speech therapy during that time because I wasn't allowed in the editing room. So I went to cure my speech finally. And I resisted that therapy because you had to accept yourself as a stutterer.
Hmm.
It meant you had to stutter openly and talk about it. And so I talked like this for about a year, voluntarily stuttering when I didn't have to. So I never had a problem with severe stuttering. And that's
Hmm.
because the reason that you stutter has nothing to do with how it started. It's because you're trying to stop yourself from stuttering. And it's the fear of stuttering that causes the stuttering. So the only way to conquer that fear is to talk about your stuttering and voluntarily stuttering on words you don't have to say. And I got a job selling, forever nigged on my final payment, and I got a job selling Xerox toner, which I could never get as an actor because I stuttered. And I told the people I stuttered, and they said, well, if you can sell, you can keep the job. And I did. I did it for a couple of weeks, and I called the head of distribution at New World, telling him that I had a better way of doing the movie and let me do a music video. And my friend had this video coloring machine, so we just did, images of that plus intercut with the action, and it worked. And the brother Johnson did the title song. So, and New World had something to, show for that. So they let me recut it, and that led me to Grunt. So,
You
but
know,
it's not like here's the movie. What do you think? Next one.
well, even the opening of Out of Control had a nice documentary feel whenever
Well,
you're,
that's what I added to it.
yeah,
That didn't have it at the beginning. That wasn't in the original. That was the idea that it would start that way, and so
yeah,
that
I like that, yeah. But no, I've had Betsy Russell on here, and like I said, stunning, very beautiful, and still is. And you also did, of course, Forbidden World, which has a cult following.
that's really got that was one of that's really been my best film as far as audience connection and all that. And I think I had the most, even though Roger cut the comedy out, a number of the jokes out in the end, I had the most freedom to express my filmmaking sense. And I'm really glad that it's being honored now. And there's a book coming out about it because I kept a journal during it. That's Celluloid Wars 2. And uh, because I had to, I was so over prepared all the time. and I had to, as a stutterer, never have any doubts about what I was doing or what I wanted or who was to be where and what, how long it would take and what I could do. And when you're that prepared, you're able to change and, because you run behind the first hour. So you got to change whatever you wanted to do. But you've already solved it once. So there's not that much of a challenge to solve it again. So you're not wasting any time thinking about what you want to do. You're just concerned with how, you know. And I had a great crew, and Tim Surstead was the DP, and it was his first movie, and he was just really excited. It was everyone's first time at doing things. John Beegler was doing the makeup, the
Hmm.
special effects makeup, and he just found such freedom of expression. And I gave the mutant a point of sexual point of view because he grew so fast. I figured he was going through puberty the whole length of the movie. So I gave him a sexual point of view through grates, and it was always through slime, because that's how he was built. So it had that kind of weird point of view, which is nice.
Yeah, it
And
was nice and unique. Yeah.
the Z channel, which was the first cable channel in LA, had just started, and the FX Feeney, who wrote for them and selected a lot for them, loved the movie, and so it played midnight almost every weekend for a long time there. So it's always kind of had a following, but now it's got a much bigger following, and and it's funny because when Roger said he wanted me to do a space movie, I mean the first idea I had was two women in a laser shower. So it was like, and so a lot of attention was paid to making that scene last, and that's kind of a really beautiful scene because she's wiping slime off of her while they're trying to figure out a way to communicate to the mutant.
Yeah, and of
But
course, speaking of ladies, yeah, June Chadwick and Dawn Dunlap. Uh,
they were great. They were. Roger said, when we were doing the mix and he was in looking at those two women, he said, the combination of those two captivate all women. You know,
I won't argue with that. But no, I mean, there between this and Grunt and like you get some films that have a cult following. How does that feel now, looking back, especially with some of the criticisms and struggles and hurdles that you had to overcome to get where you are? How does it feel looking back, knowing that especially audience are now really appreciating your work?
well, I've just I'm almost finished making a documentary about my life, and so I've done a lot of looking back, and I'm number one happy I have a lot to look back at, and the pain I felt then makes for a lot of humor now. So it's like I'm writing my memoir at the same time, and like it's in three parts. And the first part, which lasts until my sophomore year in college, which is how I lost my virginity as a stutterer, and uh, there's some painful things that I went through, but in retrospect, they're really funny. So I really enjoy how I lived my life, even though it was a struggle while I was living it, if that makes any sense.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because stuttering can be used for humor. Like I'm thinking about like Michael Palin and A Fish Called Wanda, you
That was the
know?
only stuttering movie that really does stuttering really well. And
Yeah.
his father was a stutterer, so he knew how to do it.
Hmm. And
Stutterers
of
aren't.
course,
He has a real struggle, and he changes and he chases things, and that's what's funny. And he's hysterical. And it's one of my favorite movies. And that director was 82. Talk
yeah.
about age.
Another one too. I watched the slasher film Secret Santa, directed by Adam Marcus, and And one of his friends is Drew Lynch, who's a stand-up comic who's a stutterer. And that's one
Really?
of he incorporates that in his act. Well, when he brought Drew Lynch into being Secret Santa, he didn't change anything about him and incorporated it right in.
Oh,
And
how
Drew
cool! I
Lynch,
gotta see that.
oh yeah, Adam Marcus directed Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, but I think Secret Santa was his best movie. It came out in I think 2018, I think, and it's about a family get together where everybody hates each other, and somebody drugs up the
Yeah.
punch with this stuff that makes people say what they really think of each other, and then it goes into people doing what they want to do.
I'll have to see that. That's great.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great Christmas slasher film, and it's hysterical. But Drew Lynch is in that, and Adam Marcus was talking to me about, he didn't change anything with Drew. His stutter was part of it, and it really worked out because Drew Lynch doesn't miss a beat on what
That's
he's
great.
supposed to do, and yeah. So
I've always had to try to have a character in each of my movies have a stutter, and always a minor character, just a daytime person, but well, that character stutters. No issue is made out of it. Just it's a stutterer. And for each film, and I wanted in Mutant, for Forbidden World, Mutant was the original title, for the robot to stutter. And every time the producer suddenly is on the set for the first shot of that character, and usually producers don't come until later, in the day. And so I've coached the person on how to stutter, and it's the Michael Palin way, because you well you it's kind of like you might start that. So there's a long time running starts, and you're trying to search to say the answer. It's not just you, and it's out. So, and I teach the actor how to do that struggle, and there's humor in that struggle too, because you get to watch it, and producers, Roger included, says, can you make them stutter faster? I just love that, and my answer has always been no, forget about it. And they don't say, you should do it, so it's never gone beyond that. But I just love that line. Can you stutter faster? Can you just get it out? Just
if
say the
you
word,
if
okay?
I tell you, if I was around women as gorgeous as Betsy Russell or June Chadwick, I'd probably stutter too.
That's when you don't stutter as much, because if they like you, you just feel like you're the best person in the world at that moment. If they don't like you, you don't even try to talk. But if they like you, and they're going to like you because you're the director right now and they're the star. So it's kind of, that's not a difficult thing. It's the producer, the man who doesn't like you, the older man who's like angry at you because you're spending his money. It's like, and you're wasting his time.
So you felt comfortable around Betsy? I would have stuttered.
Well, when someone's too perfect, you don't think, you don't really. It's such a burden in its own way that you just don't say. You just like, I wish her luck. I'm happy she's who she is, and I'm glad not to be in that world, because it's tough to survive in it. And actually, it's so there are just so many men around that, and it's not that game is not never interested in me. you know uh, and it's funny because I'm writing about this part of my life where I was born at the end of the year, so I was always the youngest in my year. And so girls, if I liked them and I asked them out on a date, they said no, no, but would you be my little brother? you know we can talk to each other, but I be close, but no dating. But it was always that little brother line. So uh, so consider me Betsy's little brother, even though I'm older.
Wow. I wanted to ask about Program to Kill because you get to work with Sandal Bergman of Conan the Barbarian and also a professional dancer as well. Talk about working with her.
Well, that's a whole other story because when Grunt was finished, you know, it got no release. The 1 week in LA, and they wouldn't extend it. So I had my review in LA Weekly, that was pick of the week. But no one, it never came out. No one saw it. And so I was having my own screenings then. And in those days, it was pre-video. So, you have to have a screening room and invite people. So it was expensive and a thing. And I kept having screenings. And then one of the screenings, Moshe Barkat, who ran Modern Video Film, was a partner in Transworld Film. And and they had started this movie that was a female rip off of Terminator. And the original title was Retaliator, and it starred Sandal Bergman, and they had two versions of the film. One by the second director. The first one was by the special effects guy who wrote it, and they stopped that in the middle of production. They almost finished. It was more towards the end, and then they did a page one rewrite, same cast but different costumings, different personalities, same idea that the CIA gets the lover of a terrorist to go, and they almost kill her, but then they revive her and they turn her into a cyborg and send her back to kill her lover. And so both films were complete unusable messes, and they asked me to take 45 minutes, a combination of each of take 20 minutes of each of those and do a new 45 minutes. And so I gave her a video eye. I brought in Duck's Breath Mystery Theater from Grunt to be the surgeons, the brain surgeons, and gave her a video eye so that I could colorize the footage, the bad footage, and have her be her point of view and put graphics over it, and then stage a new battle, towards the end, and also have her, because I had everybody talk to each other from both casts on the phone to establish who worked for who, and then I had her assassinate all of them one at a time. So that was kind of my plot, to say that, and then I had one big battle in the end, at the airport. So the battle in the end, but she was great. She was really willing to try almost anything. We didn't really have any talks, because this was her third time. So I was just trying to make life easy for her and tell her what I wanted and tell her what was for. Bob Ginty was a bigger problem, because my first time on him, I was looking for locations that could work, that wouldn't cost much money. And there's a recycling plant, where they turn, waste into water, and whatever it's called. And but the underworld of that, it's great, and the top could be a shooting range. So that's where I did where they demonstrated her ability to shoot, and always with her point of view going too. And then the whole underworld became the network. And I had Bob Ginty running for the first shot, and the sparks going off, and the timing was a bit off. And then I asked him to run again, and he said, "I only run once." Being my third director, so I
Wow.
had to, at least that time, get him to run one more time, but I could only have him run once, and I kind of respected that, and we worked it out. We had the best sequence though was at the airport, because in between the little hangars, there's a narrow passageway, so it was a great labyrinth. So with one spotlight, I could light the whole thing, and so it could be dark and then suddenly light, and people were shooting each other. So I came up with some interesting things, and but it was still, half, 40%, 60% bad movie and 40%, more interesting. But so you can't really do much with that. But the person who worked in head of distribution there saw the before and after and said that he wanted to work with me if he ever started a company. And so I was cutting trailers, and he saw me cutting trailers at a place where he was working at, doing a movie that he was distributing. And he said, "What are you doing here? You know, I really liked Program to Kill. Why aren't you directing?" And I said, "You tell me." And he said, "Well, if you have a script, I'll do it." And I asked around, and I found a script that I really liked, and that became Intimate Stranger with Deborah Harry.
I like Deborah Harry.
Yeah,
Love
she's
Blondie.
fantastic. She's great. She's the best.
Did she sing for you?
Hmm?
Did she sing for you?
She sang two songs that she they weren't Deborah Harry songs. They were revivals of certain songs that she really liked. And she played a character that wasn't a Deborah Harry character, so it was more of a midnight singer, mellow. But she was cool. She was very cool.
So you didn't get her to sing any of her songs for you, just for
Well,
fun.
no, well, they were certain that with the money that we were paying, we wouldn't get any of Blondie,
I
and
love Debbie
Chris,
Harry.
the guitar player, was there all the time. You know, they
Yeah,
all
I
had.
actually have a Blondie shirt here too, somewhere
Oh,
too.
cool.
So, yeah. No, I grew up with Blondie, so very well familiar with them. Call Me and Heart of Glass and all that, But anyway, and of course, I wanted to touch in to your work with Steven Spielberg.
Well, I right before Intimate Stranger came out, our second child was born 4 months early, and she was actually abdominal. She wasn't in the womb. I was on a job in Baltimore with my family, and my wife had gotten approved for a flight. And one of the first spinoff of Cops called Emergency Call. And it was to follow fires in Baltimore. And so the day we landed there, my wife hemorrhaged. She was hemorrhaging all during the flight. And, abdominal surgeries or births are really rare, so they didn't suspect that at all. It took them 8 hours to figure it out. This young doctor, Dr. Sanamont, figured it out and said, "Your wife has 2 hours left to live, and forget about the baby." And they went in. It was on the day of our three-year-old's birthday, and so the doctors saved my wife and saved the baby, and she was given 500,000. They said, doctor said, if she's alive tomorrow, the odds of her survival are 500,000 to one, because the lungs are only three days old at the time, and so she survived, and it was a long battle, and we came back after a little over three months, and after 5 months, I was ready to go back to work again, at night, so I could still be a daytime carer, but it didn't need 24 hours. So I was cutting trailers at night and learning the computer, because that had just started. And then I found out after that Turner was doing this 6-hour Native American series, and they needed a third editor, and I applied for the job and got it. And the movie was really depressing and hard to watch, but they liked what I was doing with my part of it, and so I wound up taking over the whole show. And it took 2 years, and I was on 3 computers, and it was a huge effort, but it was great. And then I was ready to go back into film, and my friend, who was Spielberg's production designer, said, "No, you're too good in documentaries. You can't leave it. Can't get out now." And he said, "If you were going to keep doing in documentaries, what would you want to do?" And I said, "I would be interested in how my family got here from Europe and all that." And he said, "Well, Steven's doing something much bigger." And so he told me about the archive that Steven was building of Holocaust survivors. And my way of working in documentaries was not based on based on not having a narrator, and no one could believe that I could do the Holocaust without a narrator. And so I did an 8-minute reel that they could use as a fundraiser to demonstrate what I could do, and they loved that. Turner said he would be in for a whole movie if Steven would put his name on it. And Steven said, I'll put my name on it if I like it. So for the next 6 months, I was working on spec and putting together the movie. And Steven loved it. And Turner paid me, and the whole thing took about a year. And I got my back pay, and then the program won a Peabody and 2 Emmys and all that. So it was a great experience working for him, because you're working in an atmosphere where you're trying to do the absolute best at all times with the best possible in the best possible way. And I only talked to him a few times, but the few times were just kind of extraordinary. One time, I really wanted to visualize everything with art, and I found smuggled art by the people who didn't survive, who were able to communicate through primitive art what went on, and Stephen loved that, and we talked about Holocaust art and children's art with that, and then the notes he gave me were more like I was using too much music at times, because he didn't want it to have any kind of Hollywood feel to it,
Mhm.
and so I did eliminate some of that. But music is kind of key to everything I do, and I used klezmer music, and which is very soulful too. In addition to being exciting, it has the sadness in it. And there was one song, my Yiddish Mama, that it's at the heart of the movie. And so anyway, it was a great experience.
Well, tell me, since Grunt, a wrestling movie, had you run into like, have you connected with Adrian Street and Miss Linda since that movie? No.
No, no,
No.
I didn't have any personal connections
Yeah.
with anyone really before, during, during or after. I didn't hang out. I didn't, it was too much. We only had 17 days to shoot the movie. So it was a pretty intense thing. And they were challenging me. I had to keep proving myself to them that I could just work hard and be serious and, serve them. When you take a low angle on people, they suddenly feel good. They're relaxed. And I learned that with kids, that if you're photographing kids, if you're on the floor, they like that. So they're suddenly, they'll do things that they wouldn't normally do, because they're not intimidated. So I like the low angle. So
No,
they knew, I always let them know that I was there to make them look good as much as I could, and they let me know what they could do, and um, and people had the sense of humor that everybody had was is never in doubt. I mean, we just clicked on a great level.
I think Tommy Kovac had mentioned that your wife is in the industry as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, when I met her, she was just starting out as a songwriter.
She was involved with Get Crazy.
Yes. Yeah, she plays the keyboard
Well,
in
I,
that.
I
She
bring
has to
that
work
up be
behind the scenes.
I
Yeah.
bring that up because I've had the director Alan Arkish on here 3 times,
Oh, great. Oh, great.
and he said that movie would never be on Blu-ray because of rights to songs and this and that. And of course, when I had him on the second or third time, I held that Blu-ray up and said, "Who
Okay.
called it? Who called it?" I had him on, and I've had 2 or 3 others from that movie on as well. I was
She
wondering,
she she did the film score for
yeah,
in the world, and a number of my scores, and she's worked for Turner, and other companies, but she was like the first. She was fully electronic, and and her band. She had a band for 10 years. Her time was called Pink Plastic. Although otherwise it went by her name, Susan Justin, and We had one of the first videos on MTV and their garage band. They had the studio stuff and then they had the garage band stuff. So we fit into that zone, and that was great. Uh,
I was wondering if you could connect me with her to have her on here too.
Absolutely.
I would love to have her on here, because I definitely remember those concert scenes, and I know what scene she was in. So yeah, I'd love to have her on here,
Good.
you
I,
know.
I and I made a documentary assemblage of her show basically because I shot her performances at that time. Video had just started, and Sony had a deck with a camera attached to it with a cord, So, and
Mhm.
my friend had that, who was Spielberg's production designer eventually, but before he was Spielberg's, he had that, and so I would borrow that, and I shot her shows that way. So I do have a thing, and then the daughter who was born early had a band up until COVID called Starving Darling, and her videos are available now on Spotify.
Oh, great. Great. You got a lot of talented people in your family. Well, yeah, connect me with her. You got my
Yeah, she
email
loves it.
address. I'd love to have her come on here and talk about this movie that Alan Arkish said would never be on Blu-ray. Boy, did I make him eat that. Oh, I drove him nuts with that. I said, "Who called it? Who called it?" I enjoy that movie, So yeah. Anyway, I gotta get Grunt on Blu-ray now that I know that it's available. I thought that was brilliant. I don't care what New World Pictures says. Grunt was brilliant, and I'm glad you're proud of it. You should be because
I
it
just
was,
wish I could get people to see it. I just wish it could be seen, but
well, you know
maybe
what? We got
we
this
don't.
interview right here. Of course,
Okay,
Tommy Kovac had you on his show. Um, so it's being highlighted on here. So hopefully, we can introduce it to more people.
great. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. You got anything else you'd like to promote? Any projects coming up that you want
Well,
to
my
promote
book
on
is the
here?
big thing, celluloid wars. That's what I'm trying to promote at the moment.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know about promoting my autobiographical movie. I'm got to get it accepted at a film festival first. When I first finished it 10 years ago, I put it out as cut. And the idea of a filmmaker who's not famous making a movie about himself. And it's not just about my films, it's more about molestation and stuttering and all that lifelong discovery because I was told that I was so overwhelmed with joy on the day my baby brother was born that I didn't know what to say. So my vocal cords became paralyzed for 2 weeks. And when I started talking again, I stuttered. And it was really difficult for me to associate stuttering with the moment of joy. And it took until I was 33 to uncover it. Um, anyway, I don't want to get lost in that again.
Well,
Uh,
you know what? You overcame all that and you made some great movies. And like I said, as somebody who grew up with wrestling, I like what you did with this movie. Um, I think wrestling fans would love it. I love the fact that you took the wrestling very seriously, especially the way you shot it. I love the mystery of it. Is this mask guy Mad Dog? I thought the real reveal part for the Battle Royal was brilliant. And I
okay.
like the fact you got real wrestlers involved with it. I love the two characters documenting, I thought they played off each other beautifully. And yeah, I think the humor worked for it. I think Grunt wrestling movie it belongs up there in the A category, not B, not C, definitely not D. It belongs up there in the A category. I thought it was great. I think you should be proud of it. And you impressed me. So there you go. Like I was blown away, and I liked how you were able to combine all those elements and still make and you mentioned this is Spinal Tap. You know what? This just like with Get Crazy would play a great double feature with Rock and Roll High School. Speaking of Alan Arkish, I think Grunt, a wrestling movie, would play a great double feature with This is Spinal Tap. Yep. So there you go.
Yeah, well,
Like
have it.
I think it would be great. I think it would be great. So um kudos to you. I think you made a
Well,
wonderful.
maybe it should be a June Chadwick festival then, possibly.
There you go. There you go. Make it a June Chadwick festival. Have her get chased by aliens. Anyway, it was wonderful having you come
It's
on
great
here
to be with
today,
you.
and I've had a lot of fun talking about this, and I love hearing your passion about your projects, especially Grunt. Um, I'm glad you still hold it dear, and it's a film I think you definitely should be proud of. So,
Oh, thanks.
yeah, much appreciated. Before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Sure, it'll be fine.
Just just state your name and that you're the director of Grunt the Wrestling Movie, and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Yeah. And it doesn't
that's,
matter if you
that's
stutter. I won't
that's
judge you. I won't judge you, I promise.
I just have to quickly say I had a really close friend who was older, but he kept a boa constrictor in a suitcase in his apartment.
There you go.
And on a trip to the Southwest, he got his girlfriend snakes that she could wear.
There you go. I
So
don't
it's
have a snake. I got my kitty, but
sorry, it's Python's what?
Python's Paradise.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. Hi, I'm Allan Holzman. Let me try it again.
Go for it.
Hi, I'm Allan Holzman, director of Grunt the Wrestling Movie, and I'm on Greg Gilbert's Python Paradise.
Absolutely. You did that without a stutter. There you go, man. There you go. Yes, absolutely. And put me in touch with Susan. I'd love to have her on here.
Okay,
So, yeah, absolutely. Much appreciated, and great luck with your documentary about your life, and best of success. And yeah, I'll send this link to you whenever I have it ready for you.
okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. God
Okay,
bless you. You take care.
okay, okay. Bye.
Yep. Bye bye.